Okay, and we're live this morning on Keystroke Medium. I am Josh Hayes here with the beautiful and bald Scott Moon right over there.
With the hat.
And today we are having best-selling author Michael Bunker, the author of the techno thriller Brother Frankenstein, and of course the ever-popular Amish science fiction novel Pennsylvania. We are thrilled to have Michael on the show. Good morning. How are you doing today?
I'm doing wonderfully. I'm in sunny Austin, Texas. I came down here for Armadillo comes Friday, and about to head back as soon as this interview's done. But it's been a great weekend.
Excellent.
Fantastic.
Yes. Do you have pretty good turnout at that event?
Yeah, I think it was great. You know, for a smaller con, it's kind of like a local con, but I think it did really, really well. And then last night they had another event here in Austin, the Indie Pub Austin meeting, which was great. Had a great speaker, and so I've gotten to learn a lot over about 3 days.
Cool.
Fantastic.
Sounds good. Why don't we get started? Can you tell us a little bit kind of about yourself and how you got started? I guess you have an interesting backstory or interesting position in the genre niche there, so I think our listeners would be curious to hear how you got going.
Yeah, I'm a plain person, which means it's something like Amish or Mennonite. We live in a plain off-grid community in Central Texas, and although we're plain and off-grid, doesn't mean that we don't utilize any technology. So back around 2009, actually about 2005, we moved to Central Texas and started this kind of off-grid community, and I had a little blog going, and I wrote a daily blog, and people started asking me a lot of questions about how we live and how do you do things, how do you get water when you're off-grid, how do you do, so I started writing this nonfiction book, basically. I put it up a chapter at a time on my blog, never had any intention of publishing it, and it got to be so popular that people were demanding to have it in print. I didn't know anything about KDP or anything about indie publishing, really, and so I had a friend who knew how to do all of that kind of stuff, and he introduced me to Amazon, KDP, CreateSpace. He did all the work, did the cover for the book, pushed it up, and very, very surprising to me, it was kind of an overnight hit. It went up to number 26 overall on all of Amazon.com when it was launched. And that was in paperback too. There was almost no Kindle versions sold. So as you would imagine,
that's kind of backwards from the Amazon.
And so then right, and so it made me start thinking that this is something I might be able to do. And one of the things that people were contacting me about was, they liked having the nonfiction book, but they had a hard time getting their imaginations around what type of situations might necessitate living off-grid or having to be able to know these skills. And so I decided to write a fiction novel. And I had written novels when I was younger that I had no intention of publishing. I wrote a novel when I was 20. I was writing a novel when I met my wife. And these were just things I kind of wrote. I never submitted them. I never queried an agent or anything. And I just wanted to know that I could do it.
Yeah.
So this kind of made me start thinking that I might be able to do this. And so I wrote a novel called The Last Pilgrims, which we put up on KDP in 2011 and CreateSpace, and it did really well. And then it kind of, I guess the genre you would call it was post-apocalyptic, historical, kind of almost a historical fiction. And then so the question that came from readers is, and this was 25 years, it was set 25 years after a systemic collapse. So all these people, everybody was living off-grid at this point. And so a lot of people asked me the question. They were saying, well, how could that happen? What in the world would happen that the whole world would be without power 25 years after an event? So I wrote a novel with a friend of mine named Chris Sawalt, a epic novel called Wick. And about this time is when I started to find out that Amazon was categorizing my books as sci-fi, because if you're post-apocalyptic or dystopian, they stick that into the sci-fi super category. And so it was really, really strange because I wear a plain dress and we live off-grid and we live kind of a plain life, and these people were saying, oh yeah, he's the Amish sci-fi writer. And
cool.
That was the first kind of, and I argued with it. I was like, no, that's not what it is. It's post-apocalyptic. It's realistic. It's not sci-fi.
Mm-hmm.
But you can't beat Amazon. You know, you can't
No.
beat Amazon. They're the 800-pound gorilla.
Yeah.
So about that time, I met Hugh Howey, and he was like, "Man, just embrace it if that's what you are. Just go write a Amish sci-fi book." So I wrote a short story that I called Pennsylvania, which was about a young Amish boy who decides to go help colonize another planet. You know, and I based it on how the first original colonists came from Europe. Amish colonists came from Europe on boats to come to America.
Right.
And it really just took off, and it became the Pennsylvania story, which is now kind of gone nuclear, and it's got a film deal and all kinds of stuff. So it's just something that every step along the way was really an accident. So there was no super plan.
Oh, some of the best stories are.
Right.
And, a pilgrimage or the pilgrims makes perfect sense when you think about colonizing new worlds. And as I was looking into your Pennsylvania book, I thought, well, this makes good sense for the genre, and why not? So that's pretty interesting.
Well, yeah,
Okay.
Yeah, a ship would have been the same as a spaceship to them. They were a landlocked people in the center of Europe, and getting on a big boat across the ocean, that's no different than getting on a spaceship to go to another planet.
Yeah.
Well,
definitely.
and I think it comes back to a lot of people. I've followed you for several years, and I interviewed you back on my website back when I was doing text interviews when Pennsylvania first came out, and I have seen, it doesn't happen too much anymore, but I have seen people make the assertion that, well, he's Amish or he's plain. How come he's on Amazon and he's got these live Facebook events and he's got all this technology? And you've said it several times that it's not the technology, it's what we choose to use and how we choose to use it. And so, I mean, yeah, with the ships, I mean, they could have just easily said before coming to America, we don't believe in these ship technologies. That's crazy, but they didn't. And,
That's right. Yeah. Yeah, and to them it would have been really, really strange, but at the same time, they weigh their options. They weigh what is the promise here. The promise is that there's an infinite amount of land available for us to spread out and live how we want to live, and
Right.
That's what we do. Is we try to live deliberately. We don't. We make choices that can seem hypocritical to some people, but to us they're not, because everybody makes the same choices. They just make them at a different level.
right.
I wonder if one of the reasons you have such success with your early nonfiction, I've seen a lot of minimalism. I don't know if that is similar or maybe at least compatible with what you're talking about, where people are trying to live more intentionally, intentional living, those types of things. I see lots of blogs on that, and even some
Oh, absolutely.
shows. So very timely
it's
information.
really right, and there's the whole tiny house movement, and there's a lot of people that are going back towards more real food, more natural food growing, and all of this is really all part of the same thing, which is kind of very deliberately not just living in whatever way the commercial system kind of herds us as sheep, but actually making decisions along the way. And so I think that resonates in the books.
I'm definitely all with that. I'd like to, you can't do everything. One of the biggest mistakes I was ever taught, I had a great teacher in high school who said you can do anything you want. Well, I misinterpreted that to I can do everything. And so I have like 50 hobbies. So now I'm trying to slice it down to what's important, what I really want to accomplish. So very timely information.
It's interesting, the minimalistic view, like Kevin Tumlinson, he sold his house, and now he lives in a mobile home or motor home with his wife, and they go around and they do different things. But it's interesting to me to see a lot of people in our career field that, like everybody else through the late 90s and early 2000s, it was how much technology can you get your hands on? Can I have the next iPod or the next computer and this and that, and a huge boost in commercialism where everybody's just, I've got to have this. And now in the late 2000 teens, you see kind of a big downturn where people are just fed up about giving their money to these corporations, and they don't want all the technology. They don't want to be hooked in. And it's interesting because your books seem to reflect a lot of that.
I remember growing up with my dad. my dad and his friends, they always had this saying, and it was a bumper sticker, but they were kind of serious, kind of joking, but the saying was something like, "He who dies with the most toys wins," and they were serious.
Right, right.
You know?
Well, and we went through a technological period where to have the newest technology was very, very entrapping. So, like, TVs were huge, pieces of furniture, and then you had a hi-fi. This is 70s going into the 80s, and then things started to get a little bit more mobile, where you got Walkmans and things like that. And now we're really in a period where you really can downshift a lot. You can really do it, and like us, I can do most of the things other than write that I do with a cell phone that has a prepaid plan. So I don't have contracts. I can throw the thing in the pond if I'm tired of it, or if I just, there's ways to disconnect where you still have access to your friends and your loved ones, and you can still do things, and at the same time, I'm not tied into this grid where I've got companies and trucks coming on our property to check the power and all of these things, and it's just it's really kind of like it's a cool time at the same time when so many people are really like saying, I feel like I'm just a slave now. I'm a slave to all of this stuff, and they're getting rid of a lot of it.
Yeah. Well, to kind of key it back to your writing, your books, obviously they stand on their own and they're wildly popular. I mean, I think fictional-wise, I think Pennsylvania was kind of like your growth spurt, as it will, for your books. At least that's how I see it. Your popularity kind of took off with that, and then with the Kindle Worlds with Pennsylvania. But I think a lot of your success, and I could be wrong, is that you're very open with your readers, and you share a lot of your life. And I know that while I read and I love your work, I really enjoy seeing your positive Facebook posts, your positive interaction with all your fans, and I think that some authors could take a very good lesson from you in growing their businesses. All you have to do is be personable, be likable with your people, and be honest, be real. Don't put your a face out there that's not actually you.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true, and I think there's a lot of times when people first get into this that they're looking for a brand, or they're looking for something that they can do that sets them off as unique. And what I've found is it's not just being interesting, which you can be, because there's something interesting about you, which is why you want to write. There's things that are in you that are unique, but it's also being involved in other people and how other people think and the things in their lives, and so a lot of the social media, which is easy for me to use in my lifestyle because I have a cell phone and I can get on Facebook and people can ask me questions. They do all the time, and I can actually be involved, answer their questions. I get author emailed me the other day, and he's writing a post-apocalyptic book, and he's like, I don't know anything about cattle. Can you help me out with this, post-apocalyptic question about what cattle would be like? And so, I can engage with people and help people, and at the same time, they're getting to see a life that's different than theirs, and that there are interesting people out there and interesting stories that inform the work. And so it's kind of a symbiotic relationship. It's not just the books. And you have some people, that's what they want to do. They just want to do the books, and they kind of want to hide from the rest of it. Then you have other people that really kind of force a persona that's not them. It's not naturally them, and people pick that up pretty quickly.
Right. Yeah.
There probably is a high rate of what do you call it, introvertism, or maybe people being introverts in the writing community. Because I think, I can kind of go either way. Depends on who I'm talking to.
Well, one thing I've learned, and I just wrote about this in Hell in the Sea, is that there's a lot of writers who say they're introverts until you meet them, and then you're like, well,
shut up.
Maybe not as much. I think there's almost like this thing you're supposed to be as a writer, and I think a lot of people kind of funnel that, and specifically in sci-fi. So you're drawing a lot of people from kind of the nerd geek world, and there is some of that. We're different, and there's an enforced difference. Although if you actually meet them and talk with them, they're not introverted at all. Some of them are very, very boisterous personalities. And I'm coming from a sci-fi con where I'm like trying to hide in the corner because there's so many very, very loud type of personalities who all would call themselves introverts, by the way. So
they're the ones that are dressing up in the huge like cosplay type outfits.
I'm an introvert.
Like, no, I'm an introvert. But they're
until
walking
the
around
Batman
like
costume goes on, and once the Batman costume goes on, all bets are off.
yeah. You're at the con, and they're the guys that come up to you, and they're like, and I was going to write this comedy spiel, but they come up to you and they start every sentence with, "Of course you know that," and then it's some obscure point that nobody knows. It's like some comic book from the 70s that there's only one copy of it available, and the guy knows when he says it that you have no idea what he's talking about. So he's coming up to an Amish guy, and he's like, "Well, of course you know, in Battle of Sauron, blah, blah, blah." And so it's like, that's kind of what I'm talking about when I'm saying this guy's not really an introvert. He's like very, very, very proud of the things that he knows,
That's good. Once you get people talking, and writers, they should have a lot to say. So once you open them up, get past the initial awkward introduce me stage, then they probably could talk your ear off. And matter of fact, I think I've been in a few conferences where you're like, didn't we have a code word, Josh, where we need to like exit?
I said if it gets too intense, just go caca, and then we'll know that's just trying to get out of here.
The three amigos signal.
Yeah. That actually happened to me a couple weeks ago where we were at a meeting for work, and there was probably about 25 people in this meeting, and this lady was doing some presentation, and the point that she was saying is everybody knows that year-round there are certain things that happen on certain days, and she knows, for instance, on New Year's Eve and Christmas Day on the Sci-Fi Channel, what happens? And everybody was silent. I go, well, there's a Twilight Zone marathon, and everybody turned to me like I was the most weirdest, strangest person in the world. They had no idea. And I'm like, Twilight Zone, it's New Year's Eve, it's Sci-Fi Channel. Nobody else knew.
See, I wouldn't have known that.
Oh yeah, every year.
That wasn't what she was looking for?
No, that's not at all what she was looking for. So
she was saying the one thing that nobody knows that everybody knows.
Yeah, the one thing. Yeah.
Of course, you already know this.
Pennsylvania,
yes.
As your kind of breakout novel, it's had tons of success. Can you talk a little bit about you recently mentioned you had a film deal with Pennsylvania? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So we were getting some interest in different areas pretty much all along once the omnibus came out in April of 2014, and I had gone on a trip up to Missouri and came back, and I had a card in the mail, which is a really nice printed card from a Hollywood production company that said, I just read Pennsylvania on a plane, and we really want to talk to you about perhaps buying an option. And so to make the irony even funnier, it said at the top of the card because the producer I think she was afraid that I was so Amish that I didn't have a phone or any way to communicate, so she wrote this card, and it said at the top of it, it said, I don't know if you talk on the phone or how this works, but we really loved your book and we'd like to talk about buying the option. So I took out my cell phone and took a picture of it and sent it to my agent in New York City. So, which was really, really funny. Yeah, and so he ends up talking to her, and it turned out to be a really, really cool deal. And so we sold an option on the film version in November 5th, 2015. And part of the original deal was I was going to get to at least write the first draft of the screenplay, which I did. I wrote actually 2 drafts. And then just recently, and this is one of the few good times, I guess, in somebody's life where getting fired is a really, really good thing. They fired me off the writing of the screenplay, and the reason why is because they've got some big-name financiers and big-name producers and directors that are in line to attach to the project. And usually those people, and this is what I expected all along, I'm surprised I kept in it as long as I did, is that those people say, okay, I will attach to the project as soon as you have a big-name screenwriter. Mm-hmm. And so, they all know how the business works, and nobody wants a really unknown screenwriter on it. And this is, they're talking a big budget possible trilogy. So had it stayed kind of an indie film, then perhaps I could have stayed on as screenwriter. But I was glad to be fired in that case as a trigger to start helping the balls starting to drop. So I'm thinking
being part of a major
really
motion picture franchise is.
If I got fired from my book so that Universal Studios could make a movie out of my book, I think I'd be okay with that.
Yeah, you'd get over it.
That's exactly right.
I mean, I'd curl up in a corner.
Yeah.
But I'd probably be okay with it after that.
Because when they option.
Yeah, I was pretty excited.
When they option a movie, if I understand correctly, they have what they call basically like a package, and so the package would include like the best-selling book, the well-known screenplay writer, who's going to be the lead role, who's a director, and they put all that together. And if they get enough points, then the process will kind of go forward. And so sometimes the package can be something like Tom Cruise is in it, and that's the only really thing about it. Other times it can be it's a best-selling book. But the more elements, like I said, your best-selling book plus a well-known Hollywood screenplay writer and so on makes it a lot stronger for their launch, I guess, is what I've researched anyway.
That's right. And one of the things that's usually one of the last things to come on board is you perhaps you get a star that wants to do it, and you get a director that people know that it wants to be attached. And one of the last things to come on board is usually the financing. And so that's the thing that makes them decide to do the movie. Mm-hmm. And one of the benefits, or one of the exciting things about Pennsylvania right now, is the first thing that we lined up was the financing. And so,
that's very cool.
It makes it much easier to get a big name director and other people attached once that happens. And so that to me, of course, at any moment, any of this could fall through. That's the way Hollywood is. And most projects never get made, but this is it's a very, very good sign so far.
That's pretty awesome.
You're not writing the screenplay, but obviously you're going to have a touch on it. Have they picked a writer, or are they making any headway in that direction, or do you know?
That's what they're working on right now, and so hopefully that's going to be something that's going to get done pretty soon. And so with the other things that are already all hanging, waiting on that, I think that's going to happen pretty quickly.
Very cool.
I can't wait. So what do we got? What's up next? We got Pennsylvania. We've talked about Pennsylvania and the film deal.
Let's talk about Brother Frank, because I really thought that this was an interesting take on a techno thriller from an Amish perspective, and it's not strictly Amish science fiction, but there is elements of it in the book. Can you talk about kind of your inspiration for Brother Frank and kind of how it grew from that?
Yeah, it actually started off in a humorous conversation between myself and Nick Cole, and we had come up with a pitch for a big publishing concern who was willing to hear our pitch, and we came up with this idea that we thought was really, really good, and they were very interested for a little while, and then they dropped out of it later on, and we were following the publisher editor, who was the guy who kind of handled the project. We were following him on Twitter, and later that day, totally unrelated to him dropping our project, he tweeted, "I want more robot dinosaurs." And so,
so do my kids.
As authors do, Nick and I were kind of ridiculing the fact that you can't get a really good something creative and new done because these guys want robot dinosaurs. And so Nick kind of offhand said, what you need to write is you need to write Amish Robot Frankenstein. And we kind of sat there after he said that and laughed, and then the more I thought, actually a story here, because the whole original story of Frankenstein was this question about what it is to be human.
Right.
And so I thought, perhaps there is something here. And so I kept sending Nick these pitch ideas for the thing, and me ideas. And finally, I said, what? I'm just gonna sit down and write this thing. I think it's a good story. And so the basic theme of it is that a guy who's a doctor and a robotics expert for DARPA, a scientist for DARPA, which is the group within the federal government that does a lot of advanced technology and robotics and all that for defense systems. He just it does some pro bono work among the Amish, and he makes kind of his own. He's a sociopath, and so like the only friend that he really makes is this young 11-year-old Amish boy who's dying of disproportionate dwarfism, and he decides at the last minute that he's going to implant the heart and mind of this dying young Amish boy into a robot that he has been creating for defense uses because he can save the boy's life for a while, and then things happen after that that kind of direct at this question: what is it to be human, and what is it to have a culture, and who are we as people? And it's done really, really well. It hasn't been Pennsylvania huge bestseller yet, but I think it's done really well, and we've had interest, film interest on it as well. And so most people think it's probably up to now is the best thing that I've written.
It seems like Brother Frank really took off. And then I also wanted to ask you, it is available in audiobook, I believe, correct?
It is. It is.
Did you use Falcon Sound for that, or is that some other arrangement?
Yeah, it was really interesting because most of my prior books I had just gone on ACX and did a royalty share deal, and I would kind of get all of these bids from 15 or 20 different sound people. And I finally got a message from Falcon Sound, and they were working through ACX, but they actually had a full system. There's just not like a guy that was in his garage or in his little studio, but they actually had, several 10 or 12 voice actors that I could choose from. They were willing to do different voices for the different characters and let me pick those out, and they were very involved in keeping me as involved as I wanted to be. And so I went ahead and picked them, and then I've picked them for every project since then because they do such a great job.
Yeah, I can tell you from firsthand experience. I have the audiobook, and it is a very good quality, and the voice actor is terrific for the reading of the narrator. It's a beautiful cover that I want to say Ben Adams did it. Is that right?
That's right. That's right.
And it's, for those of you on the video feed, you can see it here. His
it's a great cover.
Beautiful artwork. Can you talk a little bit about the renaming? It originally, as you can see, it came out as Brother Frankenstein, and now it is called Brother Frank. And I actually had a 5-minute stare down of Facebook the other day when you posted, the new cover's out. And I remember seeing it and then thinking, oh crap, I really love that art. I hope they don't change it. And then you posted the new cover, and I stared at that thing for 5 minutes trying to figure out what was wrong with it until I finally saw that it was Frank and not Frankenstein. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so the book was doing well, not as great as I had hoped, and I know the reviews were just off the charts. The people that actually read it were just absolutely loving it, and compared with most indie books, I think people would have thought it was a pretty good hit, but I was expecting more from the people that had come out of reading Pennsylvania, and so I didn't know what the problem was, and then I got a BookBub for Brother Frankenstein, and really spent a lot of time and energy on that big launch, BookBub launch, and it was very, very disappointing. And so we started doing some studies and asking some questions of some people to find out what the problem was. And I finally talked to a guy, and he said, have you looked at the fact that they've tried to launch a franchise for Frankenstein in film 3 times over the last several years, and they've all been horrible flops. So you had I, Frankenstein, and just recently there was Victor Frankenstein, and they've been big budget tentpole type of ideas that have failed. And so the more we studied it, the more we realized that for some reason, just right now in time, there's kind of an intrinsic antipathy for the Frankenstein franchise. And my book is not a Frankenstein book. It was a metaphor all along. And so I had to ask myself, how invested am I in just sticking with the metaphor when the fact that some people are not buying the book, sci-fi people are not buying the book because of these failures in the rebooting the Frankenstein franchise. And so after some consideration and talking to some marketing people, they said, you know what, it's a great book. There's nothing about Frankenstein in it but one sentence, and you really just ought to really consider just re-releasing it. And so we renamed it as Brother Frank. The book is exactly the same. The cover is exactly the same. and it's done really, really well. And like I said, so we're getting some film interest in it now, and I've had at least one offer to buy the option. And had we kept the Frankenstein title, that probably not only wouldn't have happened, but down the line somebody would have just axed it because they're like, Frankenstein doesn't sell.
Right.
So that doesn't mean that someday someone's not going to reboot that franchise and make it work. But so far, it's not worked.
They'll probably make it a movie and then rename it Brother Frankenstein, and it'll sell huge, like When the Time Is Right or something. That is interesting. Right. I know that I'm probably not the only one that has at least one book out there that could maybe use a relaunch under a different title. And do you have any advice for how to do that? Because I've always wondered how that works. You know, would people that bought the old book then buy the new book and then say, with yours it's pretty obvious because the cover's the same, but I've always worried somebody buys, they've already bought the old book or got it on a free giveaway, and then you get a new cover, you put it out the new title, and then they're like angry because they bought the same book twice. So how do you avoid?
It's possible that'll happen with one or two people, but for the most part, I wouldn't even be concerned about it as long as you put in your description of the book that this was originally called something else or something. We actually got talking about this during the conference, and we talked about it last night over some beers with the people that went to Indie Pub Austin. And the general feeling from people who had sold a lot of books is that if you need to do a relaunch, you need to do it, and you need to really not be a very small percentage of the people. The fact is there are 7 billion people who haven't read your book. Right. And so and most of the people who have read your book and liked it are following you on Facebook, and they're going to hear the story. And most of the people that will stumble upon the book either haven't read it or it will be something new to them. And so it's going to be a minuscule number of people who are going to read the book. They're not going to see the little statement, you know, just like if you're re-releasing a short story that was an anthology, you put a line on there that says originally released in the Tales of Tinfoil anthology. Okay. You know, you could put a line at the bottom, originally released as this title, and if somebody misses that, then that's really their fault, and there's nothing you can do to trust a small percentage of the people.
And they should be able to return it because there's a return policy on Amazon.
Exactly.
So. And you know what? It's funny because you say have a byline in there and say, hey, this was originally released in, or this is a short story. People won't read that. I have a, and actually it's something that I took from you when you released. When you released Pennsylvania, the original short story, in the very top of the description, I remember this because I almost copied it word for word. In the top of the description for book 1, you have, this is a short novella of 25,000 words, whatever. In the very first line, in the very first thing in the description. And so I did the same thing in the first book that I wrote in my Second Star series, and I still had people that were like, this book was too short, I can't believe this book was short, and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, it says it right there in the description. It's short.
Yeah, you can't idiot-proof anything. And so, you know, there's hate reviews for Mark Twain books, and that's just going to happen. I mean, there's people that are going to go, this book is entitled Pennsylvania, and I thought it was a travel log, and I don't understand why it's a sci-fi book. And you know, you can't adapt everything for stupid people because then you're not doing your work anymore.
And so
that's just going to happen.
It is a travel book. Just get on the spaceship and see what happens.
I was going to say
that's right.
The spaceship exactly right. On the cover doesn't give away anything about the travel at all.
Yeah, exactly. That stuff happens, man.
So a couple of quick things. I got two things because my questions always build up because I have a random brain. I was going to ask you about kind of what you do or how you find your book covers, and then I also want to get to futurity at some point.
He said it right. I just want to point out he said it right.
I practiced.
You got it right. The covers has been real interesting for me because it's been a non-traditional way. I started off, I had some fans of my nonfiction work who were artists, and when I first started coming out and saying, okay, I was going to do the Wick books, The Last Pilgrims, and my previous nonfiction books, I had friends, and they were artists, and they were willing to do it, and this is how a lot of people start off. and those covers were actually pretty good. Most indie author covers are horrible, and so I'm not going to say these were like world class, but they were good in comparison to a lot of the stuff that was out there. And then what happened was, early on when Wick came out, and I was doing some Kindle World stuff, is I had another author who did art, and he said, "Hey, I think your covers suck." And he said, I would be willing. And he was trying to build a business doing covers, and at the time, I was successful enough that he felt like doing my covers was good for his portfolio. Mm-hmm. So for a while, he did my covers, and then and it kind of got to where I had people contacting me. I had been a real big fan of Ben Adams. And I had hooked up with him and paid him to do the interior work for Pennsylvania, interior artwork. And at the time, I don't work. And I contacted him out of the blue, and I said, "Hey, I'd like you to just take a shot at the cover for Brother Frankenstein at the time." And he said, "Well, I don't really do that kind of stuff, but I'll be glad to give it a try." And so we talked it out, and we ended up, and what I think was the best cover bar none in 2015. I think it should have won every award there is out there. It's such a fantastic cover.
Yeah.
And what I've done since then is I get people that contact me that are artists that either want to ask advice as how they can get into the business, or they are actually pitching me on doing covers for me. And so people, okay, here's my next project is going to be Futurity. If you just want to mock something up and send it to me, I'll take a look at it. I can't make you any promises, but I can hook you up with other authors who are looking for covers. And the last two, which is Hell in the Sea, which is the page, and then I just put out a short story called One Arm of the Octopus. I had Kevin G. Summers do those because he's a really, really good friend, and I know he's a really good artist, and I just Facebook messaged him. I said, I need a cover, and I need it in a week, and here's what I want. And he just did a fantastic job. And what I wanted to do was this very stylistic 20s style classic literature covers, and I knew he could do it. And so
they look very good.
It's not really kind of. Yeah, and I've kind of gotten known for that. I mean, people contact me all the time. They're like, people know that you have these awesome covers, and they're all really different. But and so I think that's kind of helped me find. And I'm always looking for new talent, people that are not cover people,
right.
People that are just artists.
It's interesting because one of the biggest things, and I want to get into a little bit of the business of writing here in a second. But one of the interesting things that I've seen that is trending in indie publishing is when you talk about building your brand and doing your books and kind of keeping your brand similar. So like a lot of artists or a lot of authors will go and get Tom Edwards is the artist that comes to mind. He does a lot of military science fiction covers, and they are phenomenal covers, and the writers keep the same cover artist throughout the time of their
for each series probably.
Series. And I think it's interesting for you specifically where you go and you get different artists for different projects, and I think that speaks a lot about your work, but it speaks to a lot of you as a person that you're not keyed in, and you're not just stuck into one artist or one specific thing. You just jump around and you're successful in whatever you're jumping around and doing. So
yeah, you don't want to get
one of the great conversations we had last night. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I just say it reminds me we were talking about how entertainment a little bit ago kind of had you trapped in because of the big, but now I think it's a little bit more portable. That's what Josh was making me think of. But you were getting ready to say conversation last night.
Oh, yeah, we had a great conversation last night, and one of the things that authors have a tendency to do, and authors as a group have a tendency to do, is we kind of get locked into this little ecosphere of who we talk to, who we get advice from, and who we're selling to. And we have, a lot of us have crossover audiences, and we spend a lot of time on Facebook, and the same people buy a lot of our books. And so we can get locked into this very, very sameness if we're not really, really careful. And so one of the things I was talking about last night is specifically like my blog posts, is that I try to break out from that and talk. I don't talk about my book. I write a blog post like how to make coffee at the end of the world, or after the end of the world, or what is a Roman a clef, different things, and people find those through searches, Google searches, and they maybe, I wrote an article that was very popular called "How to Treat a Bullet Wound with White Sugar." And so that blog post just got hammered, and I was explaining to these authors is that what that does is it brings a lot of outsiders who don't know about you to your product and to your brand and to your books, and it brings in new life. Which is real cool.
You're breaking up just a tinge on what you were saying.
All right. Is that better?
That is a little better, yeah.
All right. So I don't know how far I got before it was breaking up, but the main point was that we got to do things to do that, to reach outside of our ecosphere. And one of the things I try to do with the covers is to break out a little from that, what people are expecting, so that you're actually catching new eyeballs and new people that may not be in your group of fans.
Hey, Michael, I'm going to try to rephrase a little bit of that and let your connection get caught up. But it sounded like you were talking about a blog post you had about how to treat a bullet wound with something, and I couldn't quite hear what that was. So that was pretty interesting. And then breaking out.
I think he said sugar.
For sugar.
Sugar.
Yeah. I don't know if Texas just doesn't like your Wi-Fi connection. I'm gonna. It was great up until about 2 seconds ago, and then it almost sounds like you're a Terminator talking, like you're a cyborg, which is very cool. But it's hard to understand.
Just give it a second; it will probably catch up.
Yeah, it'll probably catch up. I don't know if it's better now.
I can hear what you're saying. It's still a little clunky. Let's talk just briefly about
futurity.
Yeah.
Futurity.
Just briefly about that, and then maybe get into a little of how you write your process, and then I want to get into your marketing since you brought that up a little bit ago.
All right. So futurity is it better now? Is the connection a lot better?
I can hear you, but it's still broken up a little bit.
It jumps a little bit.
It's kind of weird.
Yeah, I wonder what happened.
It's almost like somebody's taking more of your. It sounds like somebody's taking a little bit more of your bandwidth than they were earlier.
Yeah, I just closed a bunch of windows just to make sure. But let me check something real quick. You guys talk amongst yourselves.
Oh yeah. All right.
We don't have a problem talking.
Yeah.
It's interesting that he's talking about all this stuff and happening it by accident, because I think a lot of authors are so focused on what they're doing and doing it on purpose that a lot of them fail to realize that a lot of this business is luck, but not all of it is luck. A lot of it is just being personable, and obviously Michael has personal being personable in spades.
And you can be intentional about what, things happen, just kind of happen in some cases in the Michael Bunker story, but also with his spirit of intentionality and making good choices. You take what is given and then you make your choices from there. So it's kind of a little bit of both. I know that a lot of indie publishers and people that are trying to get online and make it are really looking for a formula that they can just plug in and make millions of stacks of cash will fall on you for using this URL or whatever. So
yeah, click here, win $1 million.
Does it sound better?
Sounds a little better.
Yeah, it comes down to what we're talking about. You do need some things to happen. You do need some lightning strikes or things that are unexpected to happen for you. But at the same time, the books have to be good, because if you get a lightning strike and the book's not good, it doesn't really matter. And in the same way, you have to be able to hold on to and keep and entertain the fans that you do get if you do accidentally have something good happen to you.
Hey,
right.
There's like you said, combination.
I could hear you that time. I'm gonna I want you to hang up your connection real quick, and then I'll invite you back, and we'll see if maybe that reset will fix your connection.
I bet it will. All right.
Let's see here.
That's
So for
happened to me a little bit on a lesser degree.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure what's going on. To everybody that's live, bear with us. We're going to get Michael back on here and continue with the show.
Because I'm just getting to the good part.
Yeah. I'm really. Let's see if that fixed it a little bit. Welcome back.
How about it? Better?
Oh yeah, that's way better.
Okay. All right. Well, good. We got it fixed.
Now we know we can do that on the next show. Next time we have that problem.
I'm just going to start kicking people off.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is a good learning thing going on here.
Good.
So real quick, we were going to talk about futurality.
Futurity.
I need to get a swear jar that's actually Josh can't pronounce words jar, and and it's gonna be full by the end of the year.
You were nailing it earlier. You had it down, man.
One of these days I'll be able to talk.
Real quick, Josh and Michael, to wrap up, we were talking, and we can probably just sum it up, that we were talking about how some things happen because they're by chance, and whatever grand scheme of things is happening, but then you have to then make your intentional decisions and choose what you want to do with it, and then we can go.
And what you can do before those things happen is be prepared, and which
Right.
means that you've done all the work to make sure that you have the best product that you can possibly put out there. You're improving it every day. You've got a platform where you can capture eyeballs and fans and readers and give them the stuff that they want, and that when an accident happens, then you're much more prepared to make that into something that's good for the reader and for yourself. And
Absolutely.
a lot of times people are waiting for the accident, but they're not, and they're learning marketing, but they're not improving their product or making the books better, and that's really has to be done.
Or writing the books. Sometimes it is.
Right. Or writing
this book is going to be great when I write it someday.
Is that kind of what happened with
That's right.
futurity? Haha. Yes.
Got it.
Are you kind of tweaking that to bank on your success a little bit, or what happened with that story?
Yeah, I actually wrote that story. There was a real weird, strange, I don't want to say weird. It was a strange time, and I had decided it was early, kind of in my career. We had written The Last Pilgrims that had done pretty well, and so I was like trying to find out what I really needed to be writing, and so I wrote a lot of things really fast. I wrote Pennsylvania 1 and put it out there. I wrote this short novella that I wrote for my children. Really, I never really intended to publish it, called Futurity. I wrote a comedy zombie writer's metaphor called Hugh Howey Must Die, and I wrote
I'm sure he loves it.
a couple of other little short stories, and I had pushed all these things out there, kind of like test strips, to find out what people really wanted to read. Of course, Pennsylvania took off and did really well, and this little short story novella that I had written for my children called Futurity was probably the most interesting, fascinating story that was out there, but I had written it really not the intention of it ever being anything really big or publishing it, and so I liked the story so much that at one point I pulled it and just totally pulled it off of every platform. This was a couple years ago, with the intention of making it a full-length novel and extending the scope of it from just time travel into like a gamer Ready Player One time travel mashup, and so that's what I'm doing now. And I've already sent the first 9 rewritten extended chapters to my agent and to a film producer that asked to see it. And so far, everybody just thinks it is really, really something special. So I'm excited about that. And it's a good way for authors to consider perhaps that you've had stuff out there that does need to be repackaged. Maybe it should be longer. Maybe it should be combined with another story idea. And it's something that you can do and not lose something that was really, really special.
Right. Well,
that's good news for me because I have a big stack of stuff that's hiding away.
Right.
Let's talk about the business a little bit. You mentioned you have an agent. I mean, you're pretty well known as an indie author, and I'm not sure if you've actually gone hybrid yet. But can you talk about having the agent and what led you to get the agent, and how that has affected your indie publishing career, negative or positively?
Right. Yeah, I would consider myself a hybrid just in that I've had one book that would be considered somewhat mainstream published, and that was Osage 2 Diamonds that was published by Amazon Publishing. So it's just a book I don't own. I was paid in advance for it, and so it's definitely that form of publishing. I got an agent a little, I guess, in either late 2014, early 2015, and the way that came about was that I was working with Nick Cole on several different projects, and some things kind of started happening, and his agent, Jeff Jarick of the G Agency, kind of knew some of the things that were going on. We followed each other on Facebook, and he finally contacted me, and we got talking, and we thought he's a guy that understands indie pub. He understands what it is that we're looking for, and that there are people out there now who are not crawling on their hands and knees for a mainstream publishing deal. If it's something that can work, then it's good, and it's something to consider in a hybrid kind of way. But that, you know, I'm not going to accept a bad deal. I'm not going to go take a deal that keeps me from indie pubbing or stops me from doing other things. So we kind of found a middle ground there where he could work on foreign rights, he could work on film rights and things like that, and continue to submit some of my stuff and hear offers, even if they're not stuff that I might end up being interested in.
Right.
And so as far as the business goes and how that's changed things is that I actually think about projects now more targeted towards a particular audience. And so Hell in the Sea, which is one that I'm releasing serially through Patreon.com, is something that's a kind of a literary fiction novel. It's not sci-fi, and I'm targeting that towards a particular group of people, and those are people that enjoy the art. They enjoy me as a writer, and they're gonna. If I wrote something completely out of left field that's not sci-fi, they're going to like it, and they want to encourage that. With Futurity, it's something that I think would do really, really well with the mainstream publisher if they could be open-minded enough to make a deal that's good for both of us and good for the reader. But if it works out that we can't get the kind of offer on the book that I would like to see, then it's perfectly suited for me to come out with it and self-publish it. And like I said, we're already talking with a Hollywood producer who's very interested in the story for a TV type of pitch. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, it's the business is changing, and it's I think people need to start looking at different outlets and different ways to market their product. There's a lot of video outlets out there now. There's web shows. There's a lot of different ways that a product can be, your writing can be marketed differently. So that's kind of the things I'm looking at.
Comes back to being prepared for when that lightning strikes. If you got if you're ready as you can be.
That's right, and to try to rethink things. You know, one of the things, if you look at Brother Frank, the renaming and re-releasing of the book, Futurity, which is the repackaging and rewriting and novelization of a previously issued work. I'm going through kind of my backlist now and putting out short stories that I wrote either as short story additions into the Pennsylvania World, or that I added for an anthology. And some of those, I think, have the seeds of ideas for a bigger world and could be novelized as well. So it's just a constant examination of what we're doing. And like you said, you got to be prepared for anything in the changing of the market. And so it's kind of a fun time.
Yeah, it is.
You mentioned you mentioned getting a BookBub and running ads like that, and can we talk a little bit about your launches? I know about 2 years ago, maybe now, you had a program with Tim Grahl, is that right? About launching your book, and I don't know if you still do some of the things that you guys included in that webinar. Specifically, do you do KDP or pre-orders, or how do you market a new release?
I really I have all these tools and things that we can do, and then at the time I looked and talked to other authors and see what's working. And so, like last night, I went to Indie Pub Austin. We had a speaker here named Michael Anderle, who is really just, I mean, he's having phenomenal success, and he's doing things really differently. You know, it's a very interesting system that he has of releasing books. He releases at least a book a month, and in some cases he's putting things out every 7 or 14 days. And it's a real crazy publishing schedule, but the ideas that he has about why these things are working are really interesting, and that video is going to be available. Matt Herron, whose house I'm at, is going to be putting that video available in his indieauthorsociety.com group. So that'll be available here eventually for people that are interested in it. But I learned a lot from it because things are always changing, and there's always the guy out there that says, okay, this was working in 2014, but it's not working in 2016. Right. And so this is what I'm doing that's different, that's bringing me a lot of eyeballs, and people are getting involved in it. And so that's the kind of stuff I want to learn about.
I think Michael Anderle is real active or started out being real active on the K boards, and I know he does write quickly and publish quite a bit. Yeah, and he's had a lot of success.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's a different product. You know, I was talking with the group yesterday, and I said, you know, there's different ways to do things, and one of the things he's doing is he's putting out what I would call almost like when they first started after World War II, and you had the interstate highway system, and people were putting up diners and putting up mom and pop hamburger places, and then somebody comes out and goes, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to open up at every corner. I'm going to put, and we're going to have the same burgers, we're going to have the same fries, you get the same meal no matter where you are, and we're going to do it quickly, and they're going to be cheap, and people are going to love it, and it's McDonald's. And you know, it's a different business model, and not everybody wants a McDonald's hamburger. There's people that are going to want, you know, the stuff I'm writing or the stuff you're writing, or maybe you can do both of those things. Maybe you can write a novel that's very, very quick, that's designed for a particular audience of people who like stuff to come out really, really fast. My dad reads spy novels, and he reads one novel a day. And so and if I came up to him that evening and I said, what book did you read today, what was the title of it, and what was the storyline, he couldn't tell me. That's not why he reads books. And he doesn't. He reads my books, and he doesn't generally like them because he said, if I have to think, that's not what I'm doing it for. But there's a lot of people like that, and there's a reason that those books are in Walmart. That, you know, they write the same book over and over and over again. And this is a plan where somebody who wants to do that kind of thing or hybridize it with what they're doing would work really well for them.
That's an interesting distinction because, you know, you don't necessarily want to if you carried every book that you read with you all the time and kind of this long-term relationship with it, that could be cumbersome. So I know people who read fast and they want to experience the book, and then they got to move on to the next thing. So I could see, as an author, it's hard to imagine that because, you know, you put hundreds and hundreds of hours into it, so you think everybody else is going to, you know, want to have this resonate for the rest of their lives, and maybe not everybody's looking for that all the time.
Right, and there's no reason you can't do both. There's no reason you can't spend a particular portion of your writing time writing something that's a passion project for you, that you want to invest your time in, that you want it to be literary maybe, or you want it to really resonate with people with ideas and all that, and then, you know, you could spend a couple of hours and just hammer out some really good pulp fiction that you could pump out there quickly, and it's not for everybody, but it's just a new idea, and I'm always open to new ideas.
Sure.
That's amazing that you make that distinction and that comparison to writing something that is that you're not going to carry with you, and then writing something that people will be entertained by, because it's kind of like summer blockbuster movies. They put in hundreds of millions of dollars into these movies that last 2 hours of your lifetime. You go to the theater, you watch it for 2 hours, you eat some popcorn, and you go home, and maybe you rent the DVD later. But I mean, it's not something that you invest a significant amount of time in, but the money that they put into that to produce it is ridiculous. But the money that they get from that also goes to producing like Seven, which is one of my favorite movies. But it's not a summer blockbuster. You don't go to it to be entertained. You watch it for a completely different emotion and feeling.
Exactly right.
But they do write the summer blockbusters to make that movie, which is I like that comparison. I never thought about it that way.
Yeah, and I think we all have, or at least most of us have, maybe both types of stories in us. I mean, I like fun stuff. I like to read a book sometimes. I read recently John L. Monk's book, Hell's Children, which is really, really good. And it's not something I would normally pick up and read, but it's like, and it's taken off. That thing's like really, really becoming popular. And I emailed him the other day, and I told him, I said, man, I think you got a hit on your hands here. And it's that kind of story. It's a really, really fast read. It's very exciting and all that, and it's not going to be something where you're really delving into it philosophically or taking some type of life lessons from it. It's just a really enjoyable read, and so I think that we have those stories in us too, and there's things that we can do that adapt that approach of putting some stuff out there to keep a percentage of your audience fed on things, short stories or these type of stories.
Exactly. Absolutely.
Now, I know we're probably pushing our time limit, but I have to ask about your writing process, because this is always, one of the things I really like to hear, how everybody does it. So do you have any, are you a planner, discovery writer, something else?
I can do both, and I do different things on different projects. And so some stories like Pennsylvania, or getting into the sequel of Pennsylvania, Oklahoma, I really need to plan it out, because there's so many story arcs and there's so many very, very important planted ideas that have to hit at certain beats. And then I have things like Hell in the Sea and some other ones where I'm really just experiencing it as I'm writing it. I know where I want to go, and I know what the ending is of it, and I have a general idea in my head, but nothing's written down. I'm really kind of pantsing it as I write it. And I think doing both it helps keep me fresh. And so sometimes some ideas I'm just like, okay, I really need to sit down, and I'm getting better at forcing myself to do different projects, not sit down and write one book, but I'm going to spend 2,500 words on this project and then turn around and do 2,500 words on another project, so that I have more things going forward.
That's great, because I'd love to be able to do that.
Do you are you able to sit? I mean, I know that you have your own farm and you've got tons of work that you do with that and your family. How is your typical day like? Do you sit down and you write for a couple hours and then you go do your work, or how do you get so many words done in a day?
It's different in different seasons and different times of the year, and so there's times of the year, particularly like not spring. Summer's a real good time where I can get down there early in the morning, get some things done, email, Facebook, talk to fans, respond to business things, and then sit down and maybe write 2,500 words or 2,000 words on a particular project, and break and take some time, go up to the house if I need to do some things, or go to town, and then come back and maybe start on a different project in the afternoon and be able to do a little bit of work. And in the spring, it's a lot less. I may only get 1 or 2 days a week where I get to have that type of schedule, because we have other farm work. But it's something that I try to adapt and not become too stringent in it, but make sure that I'm moving forward.
Is the new Patreon thing that you're doing, is that forcing you to write more consistently, or is it something that you've had to adjust and tweak for, because you're coming out with a chapter every couple of weeks or something like that?
Right. We did 3 chapters in the first month. We only did 1 in June, but I'm going to have at least 2, maybe 3 in August. Excuse me, I only had 1 in July. And it does force me to do this, because it's a separate project, and I've actually applied that time because that's what I want to do. And I'm doing the same thing with some short stories now. I've decided I want to put out, or at least write, if not put out, a short story every month, just to force myself into that type of work cycle where I'm producing. I was producing this much in 2013, but with the business and the movie things and the screenplays, it's slowed way down, and so I'm ramping things back up.
Very cool.
Honing your chops.
That's right.
Well, we're coming up. We're actually running over a little bit over an hour, but with the technical difficulties that we generally reserve for the beginning of the show, Michael was special and brought them into the middle of the show.
Mixing it up.
That's right.
So keeping us on our toes. Scott, do you have anything else that you want to ask before we start wrapping this up?
No, I think we've covered a ton of stuff. Just to go back, and I'm gonna have to go back and listen to it all again and digest it. And
as always, Michael, it's a pleasure and so much fun to talk with you and hear your ideas, because it, like I just learned just a few minutes ago, you always have a fresh take on something that I can that I know is there, but you put it into words and articulate it in such a way that I'm like, light bulb. And
Well, I appreciate it, guys. It's always good to talk to you. It's always fun. I always enjoy, the Facebook time and all that kind of stuff. So it's fun to get to sit down and talk.
We do a couple different shows. We do a book review show, and we also do a show on the craft of writing it. And we'd love to have you back on our Write Stuff show. We've got a couple episodes planned for throughout the year where we don't do a typical interview show where we just sit down and talk about craft and different topics like that. We'd love to get you back on for that if you have time.
I would love to do it. Write me in.
Cool.
Awesome.
We are coming to the end of the interview, and is there any place that you would like to tell your fans where they could find you or where they can find your work?
Right. You always find me at michaelbunker.com. If you get on my newsletter, you get all my stuff for free at some point, michaelbunker.com/newsletter. And then on Facebook, it's just facebook.com/offgrid, and you can find me there.
Awesome. Well, Michael, thank you so much for coming on the show and taking time out of your schedule for Armadillo Con and writing Futurity.
You got it.
Yes. We are going to get you out of here with that, and thanks everybody for watching, and we'll see you guys later.
Thanks, Michael.
Thank you, guys. Talk to you later.
Easy. Bye.